I awoke before the call to prayer, in that sacred hour when the world still holds its breath and all of existence lies suspended in a hush so profound it feels like the silence between heartbeats. I did not move at first. I lay still beneath the linen sheets, watching shadows pool in the corners of my chamber as the last remnants of the night began their slow retreat. My breath was slow and even, yet I could feel something ancient and tender stir within me, as if the soul itself were preparing to rise with the sun. The darkness was not frightening, it was familiar, like the soft closing of eyes before surrendering to the depths of presence. In that quiet stillness, I felt the delicate pulse of the earth beneath me, as if it too was waiting to begin again. There are mornings when the air speaks in secrets, and this was one of them. A faint wind passed through the latticed window, brushing my face with cool fingers, carrying the scent of the jasmine vines that curled like prayers along the walls of the courtyard below. Even the wind seemed contemplative, moving slowly, respectfully. It was then that the words returned to me, not spoken, not heard, but remembered. With life as short as a half-taken breath, do not plant anything but love. It was not a lesson, but a commandment from the soul itself, ancient and undeniable. And I knew in that moment that these words were not mine alone. They belonged to the breath of the world, to the heart of creation, and they had merely chosen my body as a vessel for this knowing. I turned gently onto my side, placing a hand over my chest, feeling the rhythm of my heart, noticing the space between beats, that silent pause that is so often overlooked. Life does not reside in the heartbeat alone, but also in that fragile silence that threads between them. That silence, I've come to learn, is love. Not the love that clings or demands, but the kind that simply is, vast, unbound, and constant like the sky. I closed my eyes for a moment and listened. In that listening, I heard no words, no answers, only the echo of divine presence, like a memory I had carried through lifetimes. I rose slowly, reverently, as though I were stepping not out of bed but into sacred ground. The stone floor was cool beneath my bare feet, its surface worn smooth by countless steps taken in thought, prayer, and longing. These stones had heard my joys and held my sorrows. They remembered every tear I had let fall in silence, every poem I had whispered when no one else would listen. I moved across them now with the grace of someone who knows that nothing is permanent, not the breath, not the body, not even the day that was about to unfold. Everything I touched felt alive with impermanence. The wooden frame of the window creaked softly as I leaned against it, resting my palms upon its edge. Outside, the sky was just beginning to pale, blushing with the promise of morning. The horizon was a long line of silence, not yet broken by sun or voice. A single star still clung to the fabric of night, reluctant to vanish. I looked out across the garden where fig trees stood in quiet meditation, their leaves trembling with the memory of the wind. Roses slept with their faces bowed, and the marble fountain in the center of the courtyard murmured to itself in a language only the stones could understand. Everything was waiting. Everything was poised in that holy moment between sleep and awakening. And in that moment, I made a vow, not aloud, but in the inner chamber of my being. Let today be planted only in love. Let every action bloom from that soil. Let no bitterness find root in the garden of this heart. The city beyond the garden walls was still resting in its dreams, unaware of the covenant I had just made with the morning. But I knew that the world would awaken soon, and it would not wait for me to remember this vow. It would pull at me, test me, demand things of me, titles, answers, opinions, justifications. It would tempt me to speak when silence was better, or to remain silent when truth was needed. It would offer me the chance to respond with anger, impatience, judgment. But I would try, I would truly try, to answer each of these invitations with only love. I moved to the wash basin and poured water from the clay jug, the sound of it soothing like rainfall. I cupped it in my hands, noticing the way light played on its surface even in the dimness. The water trembled slightly, as if recognizing the pulse in my palms. I brought it to my face and let it run down slowly, waking not just my body, but my spirit. This was not simply ablution. It was renewal. a preparation to meet the world with clean hands and an open heart. As the water fell to the floor, it did not disappear. I imagined it soaking into the earth, carrying my intention with it, planting it deep where it could take root unseen. I dressed in silence, wrapping my robe around me like a prayer, the fabric warm with familiarity. Its threads were woven by hands I remembered in mist, hands that had touched life and love and loss. I stood for a long time in the center of the room, eyes closed, heart open. I breathed in, slowly. Held that breath. And as I let it go, I felt the truth of it again. Life is but a half-taken breath. And I asked myself, if this were my last breath, would it carry love or fear? That question, more than any scripture or teaching, shaped how I would step into the day. And so I stepped outside, into the fragile light of dawn, where the sky stretched its arms and yawned in color. I stepped into the world not as a man seeking answers, but as a lover offering presence. The petals of the day had not yet unfurled, and already I had sown my first seed. A seed not of ambition, nor judgment, nor desire, but of love, pure and without attachment. Whatever would grow from it, I would accept. Whatever would not, I would let go. But this much I knew as I walked into the breathing world: my hands would carry nothing but compassion, and my footsteps would seek no path but that of the heart. The market was already murmuring with life as I stepped into its arms, like a river stirring before the full light of dawn, not yet rushed or wild, but quietly moving forward. The sun had only just begun to draw its long fingers across the rooftops, casting delicate gold upon the clay tiles and illuminating the dust that danced in the air like spirits of yesterday still lingering in search of rest. I walked slowly, deliberately, through the wide arched entrance carved from sandstone worn smooth by centuries of touch. The weight of the day had not yet descended, and in that gentle hour, there was something in the rhythm of movement and voices that reminded me of a prayer, not one spoken in a temple, but one lived, one shared between hands and eyes and footsteps. The scent of the market embraced me first, before any human voice could reach me. There was cardamom and saffron, their aromas rising in silent clouds from burlap sacks. There were hints of rosewater, fresh bread from the tandoor, and the sharpness of vinegar in barrels soaking cucumbers into pickles. The smell of warm figs drifted through the air like a memory. I passed a baker who was arranging his loaves with careful reverence, each flatbread laid like an offering to the morning itself. He met my eye and nodded, and I returned the gesture, knowing that in his silent act of feeding others, there too was love being planted, quietly, humbly, like a seed tucked into soil without ceremony. I let the sounds envelop me, the soft clang of copper pots, the lilt of a woman singing to herself while weighing spices, the laughter of children chasing each other between baskets of fruit, unaware of anything but the joy of now. And within that orchestration of ordinary life, I allowed myself to simply be, no destination, no task to complete. I was not seeking anything to buy, nor anyone in particular to find. I had come here to walk through humanity, to remind myself of the living pulse that exists outside of words. To carry my heart as a vessel and let it be filled not with possessions, but with presence. It was in one of the narrow lanes, tucked away from the main thoroughfare, that I saw her. The widow. She was seated on a small woven mat, her frame hunched but upright in dignity, her body wrapped in layers of earth-colored fabric that had been mended many times. Her goods were simple, bundles of dried herbs arranged in small heaps before her, a few jars of oil, and a solitary cloth pouch tied shut with twine. Her face bore the sun's signature in the creases that curved along her brow and around her mouth. But more than age, it carried the soft gravity of sorrow that has taken up permanent residence, like a guest who never leaves. Her eyes were downcast, fixed not on the passers-by but on her hands, which worked tirelessly to tie sprigs of thyme with thin threads. The motion was repetitive, almost mechanical, but not without care. There was something sacred in how she moved, each knot a prayer, each bundle a memory. It was not the herbs that drew me to her, nor the stall itself, but the weight of her silence. It was louder than all the sounds around her. She did not call to customers. She did not ask for anything. She simply sat, breathing in and out, trying to remain unseen. And yet I saw her. My feet carried me to her mat without my asking them to. I stood before her for a long moment, unnoticed. Then I spoke, gently, so as not to startle her. "Peace upon you, Mother." She looked up, slowly, and her eyes met mine. They were gray and deep, like the sky before a storm, but clouded, not with anger or bitterness, but with fatigue. The kind of fatigue that only life can teach. I saw something in those eyes that held me in place, a grief that no longer asked for rescue, a dignity that refused pity. She did not respond right away. Her gaze studied me, searching not for my name or identity, but for something else, perhaps the sincerity in my posture, the truth behind my voice. I offered a small smile and crouched down, taking care to match her eye level. I reached for a bundle of mint, its leaves still fragrant despite their dryness. "These are good," I said, not because I needed to say something, but because I wanted her to know I had truly seen her effort. She nodded faintly, the corners of her mouth lifting only slightly, as if to acknowledge the compliment but not welcome it too openly. I reached into my satchel and withdrew a silver coin, more than double what her herbs would cost. I pressed it into her hand, which trembled slightly as it received the weight of it. She looked down at her palm, then up at me again. There was confusion in her expression at first, and then something else, something tender and almost painful. I waited, saying nothing. Her lips parted as if to form a protest, but no words came. And then her fingers slowly closed over the coin. It was not greed that guided her acceptance, nor desperation. It was something else, perhaps recognition. A small act of grace offered without condition. A moment of dignity restored. I said softly, "It is not the mint I need. It is you. It is your presence in this world, your breath, your hands that remember how to tie herbs and greet the morning with courage." She blinked rapidly, and I saw the glint of moisture in her eyes. Still, she did not cry. She simply held my gaze, and something passed between us that did not require words. A bridge formed, silent, invisible, but strong. I placed the bundle of mint in my satchel, bowed my head, and stood. As I turned to leave, I felt her eyes on my back. This time, not with the gaze of someone waiting to be forgotten, but with a kind of quiet wonder. A wondering, perhaps, that even after all the loss she had endured, there were still strangers who carried love in their hands. As I walked back into the wider streets of the market, everything felt subtly altered. The sun had risen higher, casting longer shadows and fuller light. The world shimmered not with gold, but with something finer, intention. The cries of vendors now sounded like verses of a song. The laughter of children was a rhythm in the divine poem of the morning. I looked at the mint in my satchel and knew that I had not purchased it, I had received it. A sacred exchange had occurred. I had not given charity. I had planted love. Not for reward or recognition, but because to walk past her without planting that seed would have been to deny my own heart. And so I walked on, the path unremarkable to anyone watching, but within me, the garden was growing. One small act. One shared silence. One coin placed in a weary hand. With life as short as a half-taken breath, what else could I possibly offer but love? What else is there worth planting in the soil of each passing moment? The answer echoed with each step I took, with each breath I drew. Nothing else. Nothing but love. The sun had begun its slow climb toward the zenith, and with it, the day's warmth pressed gently upon the skin, soaking through cloth and thought alike. The market behind me still murmured with life, voices echoing off stone walls, metal clinking against metal, the far-off bleating of a goat, a call for figs, laughter bursting out like birds startled from a tree. Yet I drifted away from its center, away from its pulse, toward the edges where silence grows in the corners of things, where shadows gather beneath ancient trees and thoughts become audible again. The fig tree loomed ahead, its branches wide and wise, leaves large as a man's open palm, and beneath it the light dappled the world in slow-moving patterns, as though time itself had grown contemplative there. It was here, beneath this guardian of shade, that I saw him. A young man, slouched on a stone bench nearly worn smooth by years of resting backs and weary hearts. He did not fidget like others his age, nor did he turn to greet or observe those who passed him by. He was still in a way that made the air around him still too, as though whatever sorrow he carried extended beyond the boundaries of his own body and wrapped the world around him in hush. His hands hung between his knees, fingers laced tightly together, not from comfort, but from habit, a gesture often used to keep the soul from unraveling. He looked like someone who had been walking a long, long road with no map and had only just sat down to admit he did not know where he was. I had seen that look before, had worn it myself in another life, another grief. There are moments in a man's life when he does not even know he is seeking, only that he cannot continue carrying what he holds without help. I approached him not with purpose, but with the kind of quiet curiosity that love teaches, the kind that waits at the door of another's sorrow without knocking, allowing the other to decide whether to open. When I was close enough to be seen but not close enough to intrude, I let my feet pause. The fig tree, massive and dignified, seemed to approve of the silence between us. I stood for a few breaths, and then slowly lowered myself onto the opposite end of the bench. My robe folded beneath me like a second skin. The stone was warm from the sun, but the shade overhead made it bearable. I did not speak. Sometimes presence is a greater balm than advice. We shared the silence like a loaf of bread, breaking it piece by piece with each passing moment. After what felt like a gentle eternity, his voice emerged, not loud, not broken, but steady in its weariness. "How does one learn to love?" he asked, eyes still fixed on the dust between his feet, when the world has only taught him how to divide. The question came not like a spear thrown in pain, but like a flower wilting from neglect. I turned my head slowly toward him, studying the lines in his face, the way his shoulders hunched not from laziness, but from some burden that had reshaped him. I let his words settle in me, not rushing to fill the silence they left behind. Questions like that are not answered, they are held. Gently, I leaned forward and reached down to the earth beside us. A fig had fallen, ripe and bruised slightly on one side, its skin glistening with a softness that called to be touched. I picked it up with both hands, carefully, and turned it over in my palm. "Look at this," I said quietly. This fruit grew not because it fought the world, but because it listened. To sun, to rain, to silence. It did not question the tree that bore it, nor asked the soil to prove itself. It simply received what was given and, in time, became sweet. I broke the fig open slowly. The flesh inside was red as a pomegranate's kiss, dotted with seeds like tiny stars. "This," I continued, holding one half toward him, "is what love is. It does not arrive because we demand it. It arrives because we are ready to offer ourselves, even bruised, even broken, as nourishment. Love does not teach separation, it teaches surrender. Not the kind of surrender that means defeat, but the surrender that means, I am no longer willing to close my heart just because others have closed theirs." He looked at the fig, hesitated, then accepted the half I offered. His fingers trembled slightly. He held the fruit like something sacred, and when he brought it to his mouth and bit into it, I watched something loosen in him. His jaw unclenched. His shoulders eased down a fraction. His eyes, when he closed them, seemed to soften inwardly, as though memory had returned, of taste, of touch, of sweetness long forgotten. "I want to love," he said, after a few moments. His voice was quieter now, and not just with sadness, but with vulnerability. But every time I try, I find myself pulling away before I even begin. As if love is something I do not deserve. Or something that will betray me again. I placed my hands in my lap and nodded, not out of pity, but because I knew that path. That is the wound speaking. The mind learns from pain to protect, to guard, to close. But the soul, the soul only knows how to open. That's why it aches. Because it has not been allowed to do what it was born to do, to give, to become. He shook his head slightly. But what if I've forgotten how? I smiled gently, watching the sunlight filter through the leaves above us, casting golden veins across his face. You have not forgotten. You only remember differently now. Begin not with grand gestures, but with the small ones. Love the sound of your own breath. Love the way the wind moves through the fig leaves. Love the fact that you are still here, that your heart still beats, even after all that has tried to silence it. Do not worry about loving others yet. Just love being. Love is not always a feeling. Sometimes, it is a decision you make in quiet rebellion against all that has hardened you. He looked down at the half-eaten fig in his hand, as if it contained some hidden answer he had almost overlooked. What if no one sees it? He asked. Then you have loved in the most sacred way, I said. In secret. Without needing applause. A seed planted in darkness still grows. The earth does not praise it, but the sun finds it just the same. We sat like that for a while longer, letting the wind rustle through us, letting the silence continue the conversation where words could go no further. When he finally rose, he looked taller, not physically, but inwardly, like a man who had taken a deeper breath than he thought possible. He didn't say goodbye. He simply placed the fig stem carefully on the bench beside me and walked away slowly, his shadow longer now, softer at the edges. I remained beneath the fig tree, alone but not empty. The fig stem beside me curled in on itself like a question mark, and I traced its curve with my finger. He had asked how one learns to love in a world that divides. And the answer, I realized, was not found in doctrine or poetry, but in that simple act, sitting beside someone's pain without trying to fix it. Offering fruit, not solutions. Sharing silence, not sermons. With life as short as a half-taken breath, there is no time to wait for love to come in perfect form. There is only now. Only the next open hand. Only the next fig falling silently to the earth, waiting to be noticed. The morning unfolded slowly, like a page being turned by unseen fingers. I watched the sky shift, from a cool pearl gray to a tender blue that promised no more than its presence, and still, it felt like everything. That single promise of existence, unadorned, was enough to quiet the noise in me. The light filtered through the leaves with such grace that I found myself unable to move for a long while. I remained seated beneath the olive tree as if it were not simply a tree but a sanctuary carved by centuries of silence, and I a pilgrim who had finally reached its doorstep. Every branch seemed to carry a secret, not meant to be spoken but absorbed. I leaned back against its trunk, the bark rough and comforting, and I let my spine remember the age of the earth. Thoughts drifted in and out of me, ungrasped. They moved like clouds across the sky of my mind, passing, dissolving, reforming into nothingness. There was a purity in letting go of every question. For once, I did not ask where I was going or what would become of me. I did not try to decipher the meaning of each twist in my life's path. I simply let my breath come and go. I realized I had spent years holding it in fear, in resistance, in hope. But here, by the stream and under the tree, I began to breathe fully, deeply, for the first time in what felt like forever. And in that breath, life itself revealed its brevity and brilliance. With life as short as a half-taken breath, what else could possibly matter but love? And not love as we often speak of it, not the kind that is bartered or borrowed, not love that arrives with conditions or seeks to possess. I am speaking of love that has no object. Love that is simply a state of being. A way of moving through the world, like light moving through water. Love that is present in the way a bee hovers over a blossom or the way a mother gazes at her sleeping child. Love that asks for nothing, yet fills everything it touches. That is the only thing worth planting, I thought. The only seed that does not perish with the seasons. The longer I sat, the more I began to feel that I was not separate from the stream or the tree or the wind. I was not a man beside nature. I was nature remembering itself in human form. A vessel, nothing more, and yet what an astonishing miracle that such a vessel could sing, could weep, could wonder, could reach for the divine even in its trembling. I closed my eyes and began to listen more deeply, not with my ears but with the entirety of my being. There was a sound beneath the sound, the rhythm of existence itself. It was not music, not silence, but something else, something sacred. The pulse of presence. And then I felt it, the presence of Shams. Not in flesh, not in voice, but in essence. He was there in the wind that brushed my face. He was there in the stillness between each breath. He was the silence that waited behind every question I had ever asked. My heart ached at the memory of him, but this ache was no longer sorrowful. It was a flame. A fire that warmed rather than burned. I realized I did not need his form, his words, his gaze. What he had given me was already within me, flaring to life the moment I chose to surrender to it. He had planted love in me, and it had taken root. I bowed my head and touched the earth with my fingers, letting the soil press into the lines of my palm. The dust of it felt like a blessing. I thought of all the people I had passed that morning, the shopkeepers, the bakers, the children fetching water, and how little we truly saw one another. We exchanged greetings and smiles, yes, but how often did we let ourselves be with each other, without judgment, without fear, without the veil of habit? I had been among them, and yet not truly with them. How could I be, when I had not even been with myself? But something had shifted now. I felt myself softening, cracking open, like dry earth welcoming the rain. And with that softening came an overwhelming desire, not to teach, not to write, not even to understand, but to love. To love without strategy. To love without delay. To walk back into that town and look into every face as if it were my own. Because it was. Every face held a fragment of the divine, and I had forgotten that in my hunger for answers. But the stream had reminded me. The tree had reminded me. The breath itself had reminded me. I rose slowly, not as a man returning to his day, but as a soul returning to his vow. A vow not made with words but with presence. To plant nothing but love. In every conversation, in every silence, in every tear and every embrace, to sow the seeds of love and trust they would bloom, even if I never lived to see it. That would be my prayer. That would be my path. And that would be enough. The road that led back to the town wound through a meadow scattered with wildflowers, those quiet prophets of spring who bloom with no audience but the sky. Each one, though small and unspeaking, seemed to carry a secret of joy I had long forgotten, the simple wonder of being alive for a moment, asking nothing, demanding nothing, blooming only because it could. I walked slowly among them, my feet stirring up the scent of crushed grass and earth, my heart softened by the nearness of things I had once rushed past. I was no longer in search of wisdom, no longer climbing the invisible ladder to some imagined height of understanding. Instead, I let the world rise up to meet me. I let the air touch my skin like a friend, not a stranger. The ordinary had begun to shimmer. I reached the edge of the village just as the sun passed its highest mark, spilling its golden coins upon the rooftops. Smoke curled from chimneys, laughter rang from behind clay walls, and the clang of metal from the blacksmith's shop joined the hum of life as though it were music rehearsed by the unseen. Children ran barefoot, their feet painted with dust, their voices sharp with joy. A woman sat weaving by her doorway, singing a song older than memory. Nothing had changed since I had left that morning, nothing except me. And because of that, everything now felt new, reborn in the clarity of my perception. As I walked deeper into the town, people turned to greet me. A nod here, a smile there, eyes meeting in that fleeting space where souls can touch. In the past, I might have looked away, offered a polite gesture, and continued on, caught up in my thoughts, my work, my destination. But now I stopped. I stood still before a boy with bread in his arms and asked his name. He answered, startled by the sincerity of the question. I placed my hand on his shoulder and told him the truth, that the smell of that bread was the most beautiful thing I'd encountered in days. He smiled so wide it seemed to erase the worry from his brow. That was love, planted in a moment that asked for nothing but attention. I passed a carpenter sanding a door and stood to watch his hands, marveling at the way they shaped wood as if molding time itself. I asked him who had taught him, and he told me his father, now long gone. We shared a silence thick with reverence. I saw the pride in his fingers, the memory in his breath. That too was love, honoring another's craft without needing to compare or correct. Noticing is its own form of prayer. I visited a widow whose husband had died in the last winter. Her grief clung to her like frost on a leaf. Most people passed her by with hushed words, pity cloaked in avoidance. But I sat with her. I said nothing wise. I merely placed my hand in hers and let her weep. I did not try to lift her sorrow. I let it breathe, let it speak in the tremble of her voice. And when she quieted, she said, "You are the first to sit with my pain as if it were not shameful." I felt my own tears then, not from sadness, but from awe. That we are given the chance to hold each other like this, even once in our brief lives, is enough to sanctify a lifetime. All afternoon I moved through the village like this, not as a teacher, not as a poet, not even as a man with a name, but as a presence, empty of judgment, full only of listening. And each face I encountered became a mirror. I saw myself in the stooped shoulders of the old, in the mischief of the young, in the weariness behind the merchant's smile. How strange it is to walk among people and realize you are not separate from them. Their lives beat within your chest. Their longing is your own. I passed the fountain in the square and let its cool mist kiss my face. An old man was feeding the birds there, whispering to them as if they were old companions. I sat beside him, and without needing to ask, he shared stories of his youth, of a girl who once laughed like water and broke his heart without ever meaning to. I listened, not as one who had answers, but as one who understood the language of longing. The birds pecked around our feet, oblivious to everything but the crumbs and the sky, and I wondered if love, in its truest form, was not something loud and fiery, but something quiet, offered in stillness, in attention, in the willingness to sit in another's world without needing to change it. By the time dusk arrived, the town had changed shape in my eyes. It was no longer a cluster of homes and pathways, but a living body, each person a pulse, each breath a thread in the vast fabric of being. I felt no need to preach, no need to instruct or lead. The message had become simpler than all the verses I had ever written. With life as short as a half-taken breath, don't plant anything but love. Not doctrines. Not pride. Not judgment. Only love. In the way we walk. In the way we listen. In the way we offer bread, hold silence, bless the unseen. And so I returned to my dwelling that evening with hands that had touched many lives, but carried nothing. Nothing but the subtle fragrance of love sown in silence. And I knew, if I were to die that night, I would not go with regret. I had lived this day as if it were the only day, and I had loved not with a heart full of desire, but with a heart emptied of everything but presence. And that, I whispered to the stars as they blinked awake, is what it means to truly live. The night deepened, stretching its velvet cloak across the sky until the stars blazed in their countless multitudes, silent witnesses to the unfolding story of life below. I remained on the rooftop, the cool stone beneath me grounding my body even as my spirit seemed to float beyond earthly bounds. The town, once vibrant with the noise of day, now breathed softly in its slumber. Windows glowed with candlelight, shadows moved quietly inside humble homes, and the faint scent of spiced tea lingered in the air, weaving through the narrow streets like a gentle lullaby. In this sacred quiet, the world felt as if it held its breath, waiting with me. My mind wandered through the moments of the day, tracing the threads of encounters and reflections that had sewn themselves into the fabric of my being. I thought of the young man beneath the fig tree, his question lingering like a whispered echo. How does one learn to love when all around teaches division? I thought of the wildflowers in the meadow, blooming in humble brilliance without a single eye to admire them. I thought of the faces in the village, the carpenter's calloused hands, the widow's grief, the old man's whispered stories. Each had spoken a language beyond words, a language of presence and tenderness that nourished the soul in ways grander truths often could not. Breathing deeply, I felt the cool night air fill my lungs, the rhythm steady and calming. Each breath became a thread, weaving me more tightly into the tapestry of this moment. I let myself fall into the stillness, surrendering all the turmoil and striving that had once filled me. There was no need to unravel the mysteries of life tonight. There was only the soft, persistent pulse of love, the ancient current that flows beneath all things, unseen but undeniable. It was a current I had spent years trying to grasp, only now understanding that it cannot be seized or controlled. It can only be received, like the rain upon thirsty earth. The memory of the reed flute rose within me, how it sings only because it has been cut from the reed bed, how its melody is born of both loss and longing. I closed my eyes and heard that song in the silence around me, the plaintive, beautiful voice of the soul stretched thin by separation yet reaching always toward union. To love, I realized, is to embrace this vulnerability, to allow oneself to be split open by the experience of life, to bleed and to sing, to fall and to rise again. Love is both wound and salve, question and answer. It is the courage to be seen fully and the grace to see others in the same way. A gentle breeze stirred the jasmine that clung to the walls nearby, carrying its fragrance like a benediction. The night whispered that love is not a flame to be guarded fiercely, but a light to be shared freely, a seed to be planted without expectation. And though life is as brief as a half-taken breath, fleeting and fragile, this seed, once planted, carries within it the promise of growth beyond the self, beyond the fleeting moment. It is a promise that even in absence, love remains, unseen roots deep in the unseen soil of eternity. I opened my eyes and lifted my gaze to the stars, those ancient fires burning cold and distant yet somehow warm with the memory of untold eons. I felt their light wrap around me like a silent song, a reminder that we are all part of this vast mystery, each of us a spark, a breath, a fleeting flicker in the grand dance of existence. And in this vastness, I found not despair, but a profound peace, a peace born from surrender to the beauty and brevity of life, and the choice to love fiercely within that short span. Time slipped by unnoticed, the night deepening until it felt as though the whole universe rested upon my shoulders, yet held me tenderly in its embrace. The horizon began to blush with the first hints of dawn, delicate strokes of pink and gold weaving through the darkness like the gentle unfolding of a prayer. In that fragile light, I made a vow, not with loud words, but with the silent beating of my heart, that with life as fleeting as a breath half spent, I would plant nothing but love. I would plant it in my thoughts, in my deeds, in the spaces between my words, and in the silence that follows. I would love without seeking reward, without fear of rejection, without counting the cost. I would love as the earth loves the seed, quietly, patiently, with no guarantee of bloom. Because to plant love is to honor the sacredness of the moment itself, to recognize that even the smallest act of kindness can echo beyond measure. Even if unseen, even if unacknowledged, love transforms the soil of our being, prepares it for growth, and nourishes all who come after. As the call to prayer rose softly from the distant minaret, carried on the cool morning breeze, I felt a swell of gratitude fill me. For the gift of this life, for the chance to be a vessel of love, for the awareness that every breath is both beginning and end, and that in this transient span, love alone endures. I bowed my head to the rising sun and whispered into the quiet dawn my promise to live as love's humble gardener, planting, nurturing, and trusting the mystery of growth. And with that, the world woke around me, the birds' first songs, the stir of waking hands and feet, the unfolding of a new day. I stepped down from the rooftop, my heart light and steady, ready to walk once more among the faces of the living, carrying the eternal seed of love within me. The morning mist clung to the earth like a delicate veil, softening every edge and muffling the sounds of the waking world. I walked slowly through the garden, each step a meditation, my senses attuned to the subtle whispers of nature's awakening. The air was cool and fragrant with the scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine, a perfume that seemed to carry the very essence of life itself. The petals of the flowers, still heavy with dew, bowed gently beneath the tender weight, as if offering their fragile beauty as a humble prayer to the new day. I bent to touch a rose, its softness trembling beneath my fingertips, and in that moment, a profound truth settled within me. Love, like this flower, is at once delicate and enduring, transient in its presence yet eternal in its memory. I let my gaze wander across the garden, tracing the slow dance of the morning light as it filtered through leaves and petals, casting shifting patterns of gold and shadow. The world felt suspended in a sacred stillness, a brief pause before the rush of life resumed its relentless pace. It was in this pause that I found the space to listen, not just with my ears, but with the entirety of my being. And in that listening, love revealed itself not as an abstract ideal but as the very breath of existence, the quiet pulse that animates all things. It is the river that flows beneath our fears and doubts, the soil from which hope blooms anew after every winter of despair. As I walked deeper into the garden, a soft rustling caught my attention. A dove descended gracefully, its feathers shimmering in the soft light. It settled nearby, unafraid, its steady gaze meeting mine with a calmness that spoke volumes. The bird was a messenger of patience and peace, a living symbol of love's gentle persistence. It reminded me that love need not shout to be heard, it need only whisper, endure, and persist through all trials. Love, like the dove, moves with quiet dignity, crossing distances seen and unseen, bridging the chasms between souls with silent grace. Settling beneath the broad canopy of an ancient oak, I felt the cool bark against my back and the strength of its roots deep in the earth beneath me. The tree had witnessed countless seasons, storms, and suns, yet it stood unwavering, a testament to love's steadfast nature. It offers shade without expectation, shelter without demand, standing as a silent guardian to all who seek refuge beneath its branches. In this, I saw reflected the deepest form of love, a love that gives freely, without measure, without need for recognition. It is patient, enduring, and humble, teaching us that true strength lies in gentleness. Memories rose unbidden, faces of those I had loved and lost, moments of joy and sorrow intertwined like the threads of a tapestry. I recalled the laughter shared with friends beneath starlit skies, the quiet tears shed in solitude, the tender embraces that spoke of unspoken understanding. Each memory was a seed planted deep within my heart, nourishing the roots of compassion and grace. Though time had taken many things, it had not diminished the love I carried. Rather, it had transformed it into a wellspring from which I could draw again and again. The realization settled within me like a soft flame. To live fully is to plant love ceaselessly, to water it with kindness and nurture it with presence. Life, brief as a half-taken breath, is too fleeting for anything less. Each moment offers a chance to sow seeds of connection and understanding, to reach across divides and heal unseen wounds. Even when love is met with silence or rejection, its essence remains, taking root in the unseen soil of souls, blossoming when the time is right. Rising from the earth's embrace, I felt a renewed sense of purpose settle upon me. The garden, the dove, the ancient oak, all had spoken in their silent ways, imparting wisdom not through words but through being. Carrying their lessons within, I stepped back toward the village as it began to stir, the first voices rising, footsteps quickening, the hum of daily life awakening once more. Each face I met became a sacred opportunity, a chance to plant a seed of love in the fertile ground of human connection. I greeted each person with a heart open to receive and give, letting the simple acts of kindness and attention become offerings of love. A smile shared with a weary traveler, a word of encouragement to the child learning to walk, a silent nod of recognition to the elder resting beneath the sun, all these were gestures of planting, small yet profound. In these moments, I understood that love is not grand declarations or lofty ideals but the quiet choices we make every day to see and honor one another's humanity. As the sun climbed higher, casting its warm light across the land, I carried with me the sacred vow I had made beneath the oak and beside the flowing stream, to plant nothing but love. To be a gardener of souls, tending the fragile blooms of hope and compassion with gentle hands. To love without expectation, without reservation, knowing that in this brief life, such love is the only true legacy. And so, with heart and spirit aligned, I moved forward into the unfolding day, each step a prayer, each breath a promise, that no matter how fleeting this life may be, the seeds of love I sow would ripple outward, touching lives I might never know, and blooming in gardens beyond time. The evening descended slowly, wrapping the village in a warm, golden embrace as the sun made its gentle retreat beyond the distant hills. The sky was a canvas painted with strokes of fiery crimson melting into soft hues of amber and violet, as if the heavens themselves were whispering a lullaby to the earth below. The air was thick with the mingled scents of wood smoke, blooming night jasmine, and the faint, sweet aroma of ripened fruit hanging heavy in the orchards. It was a time suspended between day and night, a sacred threshold where the world exhales, and silence begins to weave its quiet magic. Drawn by the murmuring of the nearby river, I made my way along its winding banks, each step measured and deliberate, as if my feet were tracing the heartbeat of the earth itself. The water flowed tirelessly, clear and cool, catching the last glimmers of daylight before surrendering to the embrace of moonlight. Its surface was a shifting mosaic of reflections, the burning sky above, the dark silhouettes of ancient trees, and the soft shimmer of emerging stars. The river's song was timeless, a ceaseless whisper of movement and change, carrying the weight of centuries yet always renewed with each passing moment. Sitting on a smooth, worn stone at the edge, I allowed the coolness to seep into my bones, grounding me in the delicate present even as my thoughts wandered through the labyrinth of memory and longing. As I gazed upon the river's flow, its endless journey toward unknown seas, a deep stillness settled within me. I thought of life itself, this fragile, fleeting breath that carries us all, and the imperative it held, to plant love in the short span granted to us. Not love as a commodity to be traded, hoarded, or used as leverage, but love as wild and free as the river itself. Love that courses patiently through every twist and turn, offering itself generously without expectation, without the desire to possess or control. A love that is both gift and sanctuary, steadfast even in the face of hardship and loss. My mind traveled back to the faces I had encountered that day, the boy with eyes wide open to wonder, the widow who bore her grief with quiet dignity, the carpenter whose hands told stories etched by years of labor. Each carried within them their own rivers of love and sorrow, currents of joy and despair intertwined like roots beneath the soil. To plant love, I realized, is to honor this shared humanity, to recognize the sacred thread that connects every soul, even when it is buried beneath pain or fear. It is to offer kindness and presence as a balm, nurturing bonds that may seem fragile but possess the resilience of the very earth beneath our feet. The river's melody grew louder as night deepened, a symphony woven from the rhythm of rippling water, rustling leaves, and the distant call of night birds. I closed my eyes and allowed this music to enter my being, feeling myself dissolve into its flow, both giver and receiver, rooted yet restless, ephemeral yet eternal. In this dance of opposites, I glimpsed the sacred paradox of love itself, fleeting and everlasting, delicate and indomitable, a single breath that carries within it the expanse of the universe. As stars ignited in the darkening sky, their silver flames piercing the night's veil, I rose from my place by the river with a heart both heavy and light, heavy with the awareness of life's fragility, light with the hope born from love's endless reach. The world around me was vast, mysterious, and unpredictable, yet within me burned a steady flame, a commitment to sow love wherever my footsteps fell, to live as a testament to compassion and grace. This path would not be without its trials. Love demands vulnerability, courage to face pain alongside joy, and the strength to persist when the world seems unkind and hope distant. Yet, in choosing love, I found alignment with the very pulse of existence, becoming a gardener tending the sacred soil of connection. Walking back through the village under the soft glow of moon and stars, I felt the gentle presence of the divine accompany me, a silent witness to my vow, a companion on this journey through light and shadow. With every step, I carried the promise that no matter how brief this life may be, the love we plant transcends time, its roots reaching deep into the hearts of those we touch, blossoming in gardens beyond our sight. This is the true legacy, the enduring gift of a life lived with an open heart. Beneath the vast canopy of night, with the cool breeze brushing my face and the whisper of the river still echoing in my ears, I whispered into the darkness my solemn prayer, that my days, however few, be filled with love, planted freely, tended patiently, and given without reservation. For in this breath, fleeting as it is, nothing else holds the weight of meaning. Nothing else sustains the soul or illuminates the path forward like love, the eternal seed sown in the soil of our brief, beautiful existence. The early dawn crept softly over the horizon, spilling pale light across the quiet village and painting the world in hues of gentle rose and tender gold. As I stepped outside, the air was cool and crisp, carrying the faint scent of earth still moist from the night's embrace. The world seemed hushed, as if holding its breath in reverence for the fragile beginning of a new day. I moved slowly, savoring each moment, aware that life itself is a fleeting breath, a whisper between what was and what will be. In this delicate pause, I felt a stirring deep within my chest, a reminder that every heartbeat, every breath, is a precious gift, and that what we plant during our brief time here is the legacy we leave behind. Walking through the dew-kissed fields on the outskirts of the village, I let my eyes wander across the awakening landscape, the tender shoots of grass reaching upward, the wildflowers still heavy with drops of silver, the distant mountains standing solemn and eternal against the softening sky. It was a reminder that life, in all its fleetingness, is also a part of something vast and enduring, a single note in the infinite symphony of existence. And though we are but brief visitors in this great unfolding, the love we plant, small acts of kindness, moments of genuine presence, resonates beyond the limits of our days, carried forward in the lives we touch. My thoughts turned to the faces of those I had met, the old woman who tended her garden with patient hands, the child who chased butterflies through the meadows, the weary traveler resting beneath a solitary tree. Each carried stories written in the lines of their faces, the light in their eyes, the weariness or joy that clung to their souls. In their stories, I saw reflections of my own journey, times of hope and despair, of love given freely and withheld, of pain endured and healing sought. It is in these shared experiences that love finds its deepest roots, grounding us in the common soil of humanity. As I walked, I came upon a small sapling, newly planted and fragile, its slender branches reaching timidly toward the sky. I knelt beside it, feeling the softness of the earth between my fingers, the cool dampness a promise of life yet to unfold. This sapling was a symbol of growth, of renewal, of the courage it takes to put down roots in uncertain ground. In that moment, I understood more clearly than ever that to plant love is to nurture the vulnerable, to tend the tender shoots of connection even when the future is unknown. It is an act of faith, a surrender to the mystery that life will flourish if given care and devotion. The sun's rays grew stronger, warming the earth and coaxing blossoms from their slumber. Birds took flight, their songs weaving through the morning air, carrying messages of hope and joy. I stood and stretched, feeling the pulse of life quicken within me, the energy of a new day brimming with possibility. Yet beneath this vitality was the steady undercurrent of acceptance, that all things must pass, that beauty and sorrow are entwined, and that the love we plant is the thread that weaves meaning through the impermanence. Returning toward the village, I carried with me the image of the sapling and the promise it held. The days may be short, the breaths fleeting, but each choice to love is a seed sown in the fertile earth of time. And though I may not witness its full blossoming, I trust in the unseen work of roots and rain, of sun and shadow, that nurtures growth beyond the reach of my eyes. As the village stirred to life around me, the hum of voices, the laughter of children, the clatter of daily chores, I felt a quiet resolve settle deep within my heart. With life as brief as a breath half spent, would plant love without hesitation or reserve. I would tend it with patience, water it with compassion, and offer it freely to all who cross my path. For in love alone lies the power to transcend our fleeting existence, to touch eternity in the space between one breath and the next. I paused by the fountain in the village square, watching the water dance in its endless circle, reflecting the growing light and the faces of those who gathered briefly to quench their thirst or exchange a word. It was a simple scene, yet profound in its ordinary grace. The fountain's flow, unceasing and generous, reminded me again of love's nature, not static or possessive but fluid and renewing, a source that sustains without draining, that gives without expectation. How often we forget that to love is to be like water, adaptable, patient, and nourishing, finding our way even through the smallest cracks and crevices of human hearts. Further along, I saw a mother teaching her child to walk, their hands clasped tightly as the small feet stumbled and steadied. The trust in their eyes, the vulnerability and courage mingled in that moment, spoke to the essence of love as both a refuge and a launching point. To plant love is to create space for growth, to hold another gently as they find their footing, knowing that to falter is part of the journey. This realization filled me with humility and hope that the seeds we sow, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, carry the power to transform lives and shape futures. As the sun climbed higher, I carried these reflections within me like a precious treasure. I knew that the brevity of life was not a cause for despair but a call to action, a sacred summons to invest our fleeting moments with meaning through love. For it is love alone that endures beyond the limits of time and form, that bridges the chasms between loss and healing, absence and presence. In planting love, we become participants in the eternal dance of creation, weaving threads of light and connection through the fabric of existence. And so, with each step back toward my home, I whispered a vow beneath my breath, not as a grand declaration, but as a quiet promise to live fully and love deeply. To be a gardener of hearts, tending the delicate shoots of kindness and compassion with unwavering care. To embrace the impermanence of life not with fear, but with gratitude for the precious chance to sow love's enduring seed. For in the end, when all else fades, it is this love that remains, the true testament of a life well lived, the echo that resonates long after the breath has been drawn and released. The day waned slowly, the sun's warm light softening into a gentle glow that spilled across the horizon like liquid gold, casting long shadows that stretched lazily over the earth. I stood at the threshold of my courtyard, feeling the coolness of the approaching evening brush against my skin, mingling with the fading heat of the day. The air was thick with the mingled scents of earth, dry wood, and the faint fragrance of jasmine climbing the walls. Around me, the village began to settle, the hurried pace of midday giving way to a calm stillness as families gathered in their homes, and the sky itself seemed to pause, holding its breath between the departing day and the arrival of night. In this delicate balance, I found myself drawn inward once more, as if the quiet world around me invited my heart to speak its truths without haste or distraction, without the weight of time pressing down. I thought deeply of the countless moments that had passed, each one like a single stitch in the vast tapestry of my life, threads woven from joy and sorrow, from love given freely and love withheld, from connection in sometimes painful distance. These moments, though fleeting, carried with them the imprints of love sown in the soft soil of daily life, sometimes tender and fragile, other times fierce and unyielding. They were not the grand gestures sung in stories or etched into stone, but the quiet acts that slipped past unnoticed, a hand held in grief, a forgiving glance, a smile offered in passing. Now, with the wisdom that comes from years of walking this earth, I understood with a clarity that settled deep in my bones that the true measure of a life is not found in the riches amassed or the accolades won, but in these simple seeds of love planted along the way, seeds that take root in the hearts of others and blossom long after our breath has faded. Lifting my gaze to the sky, I watched as the first shy stars began to pierce the twilight, faint pinpricks of light shimmering against the vast indigo expanse. The universe stretched out endlessly, an ocean of mystery and wonder, and yet in its vastness, I felt no smallness, no insignificance. Instead, a profound sense of belonging swelled within me, a recognition that though my days here are but a brief flicker, I am part of something infinite, a boundless current of life that carries each of us, like grains of sand on a shifting shore, toward an unknown yet sacred destiny. This awareness did not overwhelm me with doubt but filled me with a fierce determination to live fully, to plant love deeply, and to tend the fragile garden of human connection with gentle hands and open heart. The faces of those I had loved and lost rose before me like ghosts of light, each one a constellation in the galaxy of my memory. Their smiles and tears, their voices and silences, had left marks on my soul as indelible as the stars' eternal gleam. I felt the tender weight of their presence, a garden grown from the roots of shared stories and quiet understanding. Among them were family and friends, strangers whose brief crossings had altered my path, and even those who had caused pain, teaching me that love's greatest lessons often come cloaked in challenge. It was clear to me now that love does not demand perfection or permanence. It asks only for presence and courage, to open ourselves, to give without guarantee, and to hold space for others even in the face of uncertainty. A gentle breeze stirred the jasmine vines entwined around the wooden beams of my courtyard, their sweet fragrance weaving through the evening air like a silent benediction. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, letting the scent carry me beyond the bounds of this moment into a timeless realm where love exists in its purest form, unbounded, unbroken, and eternal. In this sacred space between breaths, I found the wellspring of my strength, the source of hope that renews me whenever the weight of impermanence presses heavily on my heart. Here, love is no longer a fragile thing to be protected but a flame to be carried boldly, a river that flows freely through every moment and every soul. Rising from my place beneath the slowly darkening sky, I felt a quiet resolve kindle within me, a deep, unshakable commitment not merely to plant love, but to live as love incarnate. To be a living seed whose roots reach deep into the earth's heart, and whose branches stretch wide toward the heavens, offering shade and shelter to all who seek refuge. This vow was not born from grand ambition but from humble acceptance of the truth that every act of kindness, no matter how small, is part of a greater whole, a single note in the eternal song of existence. I vowed to carry this promise into every encounter, every gesture, every word, knowing that love's ripples extend far beyond the visible, touching lives in ways unseen but profoundly felt. As darkness fully settled and the village lights flickered on like scattered stars mirroring the heavens above, I stepped back into the rhythm of life, heart steady, eyes open, and spirit full. The night wrapped around me gently, a velvet cloak embroidered with the sound of distant laughter, the rustle of leaves, and the soft murmur of prayers whispered beneath the moonlight. I walked slowly, savoring the sacred stillness and the unspoken promise it held, that in the brief span of a half-taken breath, love is the flame that endures beyond time's shadow, the true legacy we leave behind. And in that quiet night, beneath the eternal sky, I whispered once more my solemn vow, not as a plea, but as a living truth etched into the depths of my soul, that with life so brief, so delicate, I would plant nothing but love. I would nurture it with patience, protect it with compassion, and offer it freely, without reservation or fear. For love alone, in its boundless grace, holds the power to transcend all endings, to bloom eternally in the hearts of those who carry its seed forward.